Okay, so we need to find some bunny images, all right? And we're going to start with this. Instead of just ganking something off Google, we're going to try and do it the right way. And we're going to search through search.creativecommons.org. And whenever we use this, to be extra safe, we want to check both use commercially and modify or adapt. Let's look for a bunny. Perfect. Little baby bunny on the rocks, baby bunny rescue number 2. All right. But regardless, the first step is always, I'm choosing my desktop here as my working environment to create a new folder. And we're going to call this website. Now, the reason I'm not calling it bunnies is just because I've been doing this for so long that I've learned that it's best to name things generically. So for example, when we were doing our move, flip, and shrink example last time with the buttons, I actually named the buttons button 1, button 2, and button 3, rather than like move button, flip button, shrink button. I've learned to name things kind of as generically as possible because that gives you an advantage when you want to reuse something. So if I make a website project and I name everything kind of generically to website terms instead of bunny terms, then if I were to switch and want to make a website about ponies after I finish my website about bunnies, then I wouldn't have to change a whole bunch of names of things that say bunny to say pony for it to make sense to me. So just a little pro tip there to name things kind of generically for reuse, because when you're building something on the computer, especially development-wise, everything you make, everything you spend time on is kind of a template for you to be able to reuse later on and be faster and more awesome. So we have our website folder, and now inside of our website folder, let's make another folder inside of it called assets. Now, as you've already seen, when we save our FLA in here and we publish it, it automatically creates these other files, creates an HTML, a JavaScript file, creates an images folder. As we move on, it's also going to create more folders. It's going to create folders for sound, for video, and there might even be some other files we end up using. So there's going to be like a whole directory of stuff. And this assets folder is where I want you to save your like finished assets that you're going to start importing into the project. So whether you, unless you actually create everything in Animate and do it all vector, which is okay, but assuming you'll be pulling in any external images, Photoshop files, Illustrator files, anything like that, I'm going to want you to save it all in an assets folder so that, you know, later on you may have, however you create all your graphics, you may have tons of different revisions and whatever. That's perfectly fine, however you work with creating your stuff, but you'll want to put your final ready-to-use assets in here so that your entire project has them in it. So later on, if you ever come back to it, you don't have to go look in a bunch of different places. Just a good idea to keep everything that goes with a project together. Sounds simple, but unless you get used to doing that early, things can be very chaotic on your computer, and organization helps a lot. All right, so we want to start with saving this amazing little bunny on the rocks, baby bunny number 4, into that location. So I just clicked on it, baby bunny rescue number 2, I mean. I'm gonna right click and choose save image as. And it's trying to go into my downloads. So I'm gonna change it into my desktop, website assets. And it's some big long numbers and letters name. So I'm going to rename it bunny1.jpg. Saved, check. And I'm gonna go back. I'm just gonna check my thing, make sure it's there. Yep, I've got my bunny1 image, kick ass. Okay, all right, just bunny. Let's go with this fluffy bunny, a little bit scrolled down. He almost looks like a chinchilla. Wow, okay. Well, let's save this little bunny. Save image as, going into that folder. I'm going to name this bunny2. Yes, cute bunny rabbit. Excellent. Okay. Save image as. 23. Bunny! Exclamation point. Okay. Let's take this sunshine bunny. Some translucent ears. Very nice. Save image as 24. All right, so we have our 4 bunnies. Now, what we want to do is go ahead and open up Photoshop. And I want all these bunny images, so I've got them all in here, great. They're all different, actually, well, I guess they're slightly different sizes. They're pretty close. But I'm guessing they're all bigger than I need them to be, right? That our animate file is only going to be 960 by 540. So a lot of these images are already, they're not huge. These are like 1024. Yeah, it looks like they're all 1024 wide. But they're all a little bit too big. That would be generally okay, but a giant point of contention when pulling in images into this program is you absolutely want to size the images down in Photoshop or something to get them to the correct pixel size before you pull them into Animate. The last thing in the world you want to do is pull in a 4000 or 4K by 4K image if you just grab like a dummy image from Getty Images or something like that. Getty Images is one. There's a lot of like paid image sites that it's really, really common to just, here, let me look for a bunny, actually, keep it in context. All right, so if we wanted to use this cute bunny with some grass in his face, we could download a comp. So right here, I could download the comp and it'll put like some watermarks on it. And that's okay. That's really common as designers to do. It's just you need to let your client know that, hey, they're going to need to purchase images if they can't supply them. So you don't always have to use the free route. In fact, sometimes you can get a lot better product. That's not the free one. This is the free one. By not going free, but you'll have to make sure you know someone's going to have to end up paying for those images. And even when you go pay for the images, the resolution is very important because the smaller the resolution, the less the price. So you have to be aware of what you need. 960 by 540 is the size of ours. So we want everything smaller than that, but we're actually going to make them even smaller. So I want you to make a new Photoshop document. And let's just make it a perfect square, 400 by 400. Oops. And like I explained, you can leave the resolution default. I've got mine at 72, which is like default screen resolution. Doesn't really matter your resolution. It's about the pixels when we're on screen. Resolution really matters when you're printing. The RGB color should be default. We want it to stay RGB rather than being at CMYK or anything else. 400 by 400, I'm going to create, and we have this square. Now, like I said, really, really important to make sure you don't pull in images into Adobe Animate that are larger than the stage size, because 2 reasons. First of all, your file size will be larger and it'll take longer to download when you put things on the web, and you know that's creating unnecessary download speed for users. Very bad thing we're starting to build for the web. And then also Animate does a real crappy job of sampling down images, and Photoshop has all kinds of algorithms to help images look better when you sample them down. When you just kind of scale it down and animate, it doesn't really resample anything. It just scales it down and can give you weird artifacts and stuff. So what we want to do is we want to import, or we want to open our bunny images. This is the way I would do it. You can like place in Photoshop, or you can import in Photoshop. I typically like to just open everything up and then copy and paste. So that's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to open all 4 of my bunny images in Photoshop at the same time with this new document I created. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take all 4 of my bunnies and drag them down to my Photoshop icon here. Or you can just go to File, Open. That should do the same thing. I just opened all these bunnies up. put them in order. Start with bunny 1 over here. Over there, bunny 1. Okay. All right, now what I want to do is I want to have a new bunny on each layer inside of my Photoshop file. And I just want to kind of size and crop the bunny image so the bunny itself is kind of centered and looks nice within this square. So I'm going to start with bunny 1, and I'm going to copy the whole thing. You can click the marquee tool and just click and drag, but I use a lot of hotkeys, so I just hit Command A, which will select everything, and then Command C to copy, which you can manually select, and then right click and choose copy if you want. Copy my bunny and then go over to this document and paste that bunny in. Command V. And you can see that this is, you know, it sticks it in at the top left corner at first. So none of these are probably going to be great. It does just throw a layer in here. I'm going to double click my layer name before I do anything and just name it bunny 1. Okay, got our background layer, and which is just default. You can leave that, that's fine. And now I want to scale and move this thing around, and I need to free transform this layer. So to do that, I can just hit Command T. That's the transform tool. If you have the layer selected and you choose Command T on a Mac or Control T on Windows, it'll open up this thing that lets you, first of all, I'm also going to zoom out a little bit. I always use Command plus and minus if you're not familiar with quickly, or if you're on a touchpad, you can kind of pinch zoom. I guess I'll do that for a moment. I'm going to pinch zoom out until I can see the entire bounds of this thing, this transform thing that I got here. And now that I can see the entire bounds, I don't want to squish. Oh, nice. I don't even have to hold shift anymore. Photoshop's smart now. But I just grab in the corner and I'm scaling it down so this bunny fits within my thing. And then maybe I'll nudge it over a little bit so it gets a little centered. Just try and get your bunny nice and centered, and then I'm going to double click it to have the changes take. And ultimately, we want to do that for each bunny. So I'm going to go ahead and just click through. I'll do one more and kind of talk through it, and then the other two, just follow that lead and get them all set up this way. So I'm done with bunny 1. I'm going to close that bunny 1 image. Okay, so then bunny number 2 is this fluffy boy. Command A to select all, Command C to copy. Going back over here and pasting. And then I'm going to hit Command T to see the transform. Zoom out a little bit. Get that nice and centered. Each time I paste, it's pasting a new layer in. And I want to keep track of that and name my layers also. The reason is it's just good form to name things, layers, folders, file names, you know, and things that make sense. So later on, things will make more sense to you. But also in this case, we're going to end up importing this into our Animate file. So having some layer names will be helpful instead of just layer 1, layer 2. Keep track of our bunnies. I'm just going to do the same thing to the other ones. Make sure your subject is nice and centered. When you're totally done, you should have make sure again your layers are named bunny 1, bunny 2, bunny 3, and bunny 4, and then we're going to save the entire Photoshop file into that same assets folder inside of our website project folder, and I'm going to name it bunnies.psd. And let's make a new Adobe Animate file and make sure it is HTML5 Canvas. This should already be set for you as the defaults. If it's not, click Make Default after you set these settings. 960 wide, 540 high, 30 frames per second. Again, this width and height just came from some testing we did just to find something that was a good size for tablets, desktop, and phones without having to make it truly responsive, which is a lot more complicated. So that's just a nice happy medium size we go with. 30 frames per second is the North American default for animation. And you can do Make Default if you haven't already. Again, HTML5 Canvas and create. Close my actions panel that I had open because I am a code nerd most of the day. Give myself a little more room to see my timeline. Get all set up here. And now I just want to save an Animate file inside of that website folder. So I'm just going to go File, Save As. And navigate to my desktop website folder, and I want this to be in the root, not in the assets. The assets is just for the images and things that we want to bring in. We could put like sounds and videos that we're going to import later. It can also go into this assets folder, but I want to be just in the root of the website folder. I'm going to name this website. Now again, naming is important in the sense that it's important that you just stay organized and follow your own naming conventions. I always recommend staying away from capital letters when you're naming things inside of a file, especially when you're doing anything with code. My naming convention is I always try to make the folder uppercase, and then I have whatever the folder's name, I make the animate file the same thing, lowercase. You can do it how you like, but being consistent and having some kind of methodology is important. All right, so to bring in an image inside of this program is really easy. We just go to File, Import, and then you can either import to Stage or you can import to Library. You don't need to worry about Open External Library. You can technically import things directly to the library and they won't show up on the stage. But I never ever use that because I always want to see what I'm importing and make sure it's right. And then if I don't want it there yet, then I just hit delete and it's still in the library. So I'm going to show you as an example. Don't do this yet. I'm just going to import one of the individual images. So if I go to import to stage, I'm going to import under website, assets. I'm going to import bunny1 here and open it up. Appears to be a sequence. No, I just have it named that way. Okay. And I can see that bunny1 is bigger than my stage, and that's never ever what you want. That's why we sized them down in Photoshop. But I could see that. I could delete it, and I can see that bunny1 is still in my library over here. And just like symbols that we put in your library, I could put a whole bunch of copies of this same image. An image kind of acts like a symbol type. So I'm going to get rid of that, though. I don't want that in there at all. I just want our Photoshop file. So you can use this technique though, just file, import, import to stage, or there's a Command R right there. That's usually what I use, but it's hard to remember because it doesn't really make sense. Import to stage, and you can bring any old image in. You can totally bring in individual PNGs that you create or individual images that you find online. Just be sure to size them appropriately in Photoshop first, so that when you bring them in, they kind of fit on your screen the way they should without you having to scale them around too much. Again, too big of files that you scale down are just going to slow down your download speed. The speed of your animations. There's all kinds of problems can come from just having big clunky images that don't need to be in there. All right, but you use the exact same command whether you're importing individual images or an entire Photoshop file. So we go to import to stage, and let's actually choose the bunnies.psd file and hit open. You'll see what happens is you should get this awesome dialog box with all of these options about what exactly you would like to import. So for the most part, you can kind of just leave the defaults, but I want to go through what's on here with you, all right? So first of all, we can choose which layers we want to import, all right? Now, a lot of times you may import, I do this a lot, I'll get a Photoshop file from a designer that has like 10 different pages all put together in the Photoshop file. Each page would be in a different folder, nice and organized. And I'm not trying to import 10 pages worth of content at once. I'll import one page at a time, and I'll keep importing the same Photoshop file over and over again and just changing which layers I want to import and just pulling in different pieces of it. So you have total control to pull in the entire document or to pull in just bits and pieces based on these layer selecting. So we know we want our 4 bunnies, but we do not want this background because this would just pull in a white image, and we don't need that because we already have a white stage color. So I'm going to uncheck the background layer. We don't need that, but we do want our other bunnies. Now, looking at the other options, import this layer as, you always want to leave it as flattened bitmap image. I've messed around a lot with bitmap images with editable layer styles, like when you're using like blend images and stuff, it tries to convert, but it seldom does a good job, and it's usually best to flatten the images so they're gonna come in. It is the default, so you probably don't have to worry about it, but it's best to flatten those images so whatever effects you've put together in Photoshop with various masks and things like that will just come through and look the way you're expecting to look. What will happen is it'll try and convert some of those things to the animate versions of those tools, and it won't always work the same or look the same. The other option you want to make sure and leave unchecked is create movie clip. A movie clip is the third type of symbol that we're going to learn about. We're actually going to learn about that in this project, but it is more confusing than not to just have it automatically create clips for you, especially when you're starting out. You're going to want to create those symbols manually and have some kind of thought process behind them. The other one is the compression, lossy or lossless. And this comes down to when we actually publish these files, how we want it to, how we want them to be compressed. And we can just leave it as the default lossy and use publish settings, that's fine. Sometimes I'll use lossless, which basically means it pulls in the images, and when I publish them, it's not going to compress them at all. Sometimes I want that if I'm building like an app or something that is going to be on a iOS or Android device that's not really downloading the images. But on the web, usually you're going to want to compress things and make sure that they're as fast to download as possible. So pretty much, besides just unchecking this background layer, we can leave everything else the defaults. We don't want to import it as a single image. We want these to be individual images. We definitely don't want to set the stage size to the Photoshop canvas size. We want to leave our stage size as it is. And we do want to place the objects at the original position, even though they're all going to be on top of each other because they're all in the same spot. Anyway, so we can go ahead and import and see what happens. Now, all I can see is one bunny, but that's because I've got bunny 4, and if you look at your layers now, it automatically pulled in all the different layers and all the different layer names. If I were to use the little hide icon here, I can start hiding my layers and see the ones that are underneath. I'm not sure why my bunny 1 came in so washed out, but you can also see that not only did it take all the graphics we had in that Photoshop file, position them correctly according to the top left corner, and put them all on the same layer names that they were in Photoshop, but it also created a folder in the library over here. And what it does when you import a PSD file is it will say the name of the PSD and then asset to let you know that that's all the stuff that came in from that import. So I can open that folder and I can see my 4 different images in here. Now I can click and drag these around on the screen just to see that they're all here. This is not, I don't want to use these on the stage yet, so I'm actually going to delete them all on the stage. I want you to go ahead and do the same thing because we're not just going to have a bunny 1, bunny 2, bunny 3, and bunny 4 layer with these things sitting there. In fact, I'm even going to delete all of those layers. Now, this is something that when you do your project, may make more sense for you to pull in your Photoshop file and keep all those layers and just start working with them. But a lot of times it makes sense to pull that stuff in and get it all organized in your library and then just start building things kind of, you know, as you think them through in Animate. Sometimes that can be a little easier than all of a sudden having 30 layers and not really knowing what to do next. All right, so I'm going to save my file now that I've got my bunnies imported. The next thing we're going to do is, before we start putting our bunnies out here, is let's make a gradient background for our website. Instead of this white background, we're going to make a gradient. So the first thing we want to do, I'm going to rename my layer 1 here to background. And then I'm going to choose the rectangle tool. And over in the properties of the rectangle tool, so part of this, we want a background, but I'm going to show you how the gradient tools work inside of Animate. They're kind of cool. So we want just a fill color and not a stroke color. Okay, so to do that, again, with the rectangle tool selected, I can, in the tool properties, select the stroke color and choose this white box with a red line through it, which will give us no stroke. I want just a solid block fill. And then it doesn't matter what the fill color is at all right now, because it is definitely going to change when we convert it to a gradient, so don't worry about what color it is. But I want to draw it exactly the size of the background. Now, what I could do, I'm going to start and I'm just going to draw it like bigger. Okay, so I could do it like this, where I draw it bigger than the background. And then I could use this little, or of the stage size, I should say. There's this little clip content outside of the stage button, which I showed you when we initially were going through the interface, just to the left of the zoom options, that I could draw something bigger than the stage and then clip it and only see that. But in this case, I actually want it to be the exact size of the stage. So I want to point out that once you draw something, so go ahead and just draw it. It doesn't even matter what size it is right now. Just draw a rectangle out there on your background layer with only a fill color. And once you've done that, once you've done it, then take your selection tool and select that rectangle and look at its object properties under position and size in the properties panel. So this context-sensitive properties panel we're going to be working with a lot, whether we're working with tool settings or we're working with tween settings or settings of an actual shape or an object. So right here, I use this all the time, this is a way where you can manually control the width and the height and the X and the Y position of this thing. So to get this exactly the size of the stage, we're going to set the width and the height to the size of the stage. So the width and the height, 960 by 540. And then the X and the Y, set them both to 0. We'll stick it in the upper left corner and make it fit just right. So go ahead and get yourself a color block in the background all ready to go. Next, we're going to turn this into a gradient. All right. So we want to open up the color panel up here. All right. It's an icon that looks like the little artist's easel thing here. You can also, with any of these panels, you can always just go up to Window and find it. So you can go to Window, Color, which are crazy hotkeys. I don't even use these hotkeys. But when you open it up, make sure that, now notice you can change the color around on here. And right now it's not changing the actual color of my box. But if I select my box and then start changing it, now it actually changes in real time. So that's a distinction to realize right away, is that if you have your shape selected, And again, this really only works with like raw shapes. Once we make a symbol out of something, we would have to go into that symbol to change its color. So I have the raw shape here. And as long as I select it, then I can click all over and change all these values and see it changing. Well, I can also change it to 2 different types of gradients, or even a bitmap fill, which is funny, so I'll show you. If we set it to a linear gradient, now no matter what type of gradient, it automatically changes it to black and white. That's fine. We're going to start that way. So linear gradient will go from one side to the other. Radial gradient, whoops, it didn't change because I unselected it. So I have to keep my shape selected to have it change. Radial gradient does a gradient from the center outward. And then bitmap fill is interesting that you can actually choose one of the images in the library to fill the shape up. So we can tile our bunnies like this, which is interesting, and you can do some cool effects like that, but that's not what we're trying to do in this case. In this case, we want to use a linear gradient. So go ahead and go back to linear gradient. And for right now, we're going to come back to playing with the colors, and I'll give you a minute to make the most beautiful gradient you can imagine. But for right now, I want you to just leave it black and white, because the first thing we're going to do, so again, just select your background shape, set it to linear gradient from the color panel, and then you can even close the color panel, because we're going to use a different tool to actually transform this gradient. In the color panel, all you can do is change the gradient colors. You can change the number of colors in the gradient. You can move them around and how far they go. But we need a different tool that can seem kind of hidden, or it is quite hidden, to actually change like the rotation of this gradient. What I want is I'm going to want to make it, I'm going to say, darker or lighter at the top. Maybe I'll do darker at the top and then lighter at the bottom. So I don't want it left to right. I want it top to bottom. So I'm going to show you how we do that. Now, if you look at the tools panel over here, there's a little 3 dots underneath it at the bottom that says edit toolbar. All right, and the tool that we need is not in the regular tool panel. Okay, that doesn't come by default. The tool that we need, if we click this more options, it's right here. It's called the gradient transform tool. All right, now there's lots of ways to customize this. So I could drag this onto the toolbar. In fact, it looks like I have to. I don't think I can just select it and use it. I do have to drag this onto the toolbar in some way. So I can just drag it, like I can either drag it in the middle somewhere, or I can drag it onto another tool and make it like a flyout. And drag it to the free transform tool like this. And now I have a little flyout that has both the free transform tool and the gradient transform tool. So it was default like that for a long time. I'm not sure why they changed it and made it where you have to go find it like this, but you might have it hiding in here. But once we have it, you want to get that free transform tool and you want to select your gradient. It's kind of funky, but there's 2 different controls. There's a little arrow, and then there's a little dot, and one is for rotating and one is for scaling. So what I want to do is I just want to flip this around so that I have, I want the darkness to be on top and the lightness to be on the bottom, but as soon as I start to flip it, it goes off my screen, and I don't want to really change my screen. So I'm gonna transform it down a little bit first. So you can see that this arrow will like adjust the width of the actual gradient area. So what I ultimately want is I'm going to make it small enough so when I rotate it, I can see the whole thing. All right. And now that I rotated it, I can use this arrow to kind of bring it back up, and I want to make it match my box for the most part. All right. So go ahead and do that and rotate around and scale your gradient so that you have the black on the top and it's gradiating into the white at the bottom using that gradient transform tool. All right, next, now we can actually play with changing the colors of the gradient. I'm going to show you how that works. So once you've used the gradient transform tool to move that gradient around, now I want to open the color block back up. and I'm going to use my selection tool to select my object that has the linear gradient, and it should know. So if I don't have it selected, I can start moving these things around and nothing happens. But if I have it selected, I can start moving these around and I can see the changes taking place. I can deselect out here to really see it. But there's these swatches here. There's one that starts with only one on the beginning. There we go. And one on the end, one black and one white. So one thing we can do is we can change our colors by selecting these individual swatches. So here's the black one, here's the white one. I'm going to select the black one up top. And I'm just going to go in and grab one of these colors. Oops, keep that selected. And you can see that it's changing in real time here. All right. Now you can change the colors by selecting either one. You can also move them around to have them take up more or less of the gradient. But you can also create new ones. So if you want more complicated gradients, I can just click anywhere along here, and it's going to create a couple more colors. So I can sit here and play with these and get a very psychedelic look by having all of these different colors just by clicking and adding these new gradient points. And oops, remember to keep your box selected. I keep unselecting, it's not making changes. All right, so this might be a little much. This looks like a, I don't know, a bad 80s Atari video game background or something. So if you get a little too much, you can get rid of these, any of them that you've added, just by clicking and dragging them down. It's kind of subtle, but if you click them and just drag down, they will disappear. All right, so you have these gradient controls. I'm just going to add a second color. Get this greenish, that's a little harsh. Maybe I'll move it over here so my blue takes a little more. I'll soften that green a little. There we go, that's nice. So for mine, I've got this set up. I'm going to close my color panel, lock my background layer because I'm happy with my gradient, and save my file. My bunnies are going to have a nice kind of gradient blue sky looking background that goes from a kind of a deeper blue into a lighter blue-green into white at the bottom. So just take your time to make whatever gradient for your background you'd like. When you're all done, lock your layer, save your file. Okay, resume the recording. We use the text tool here to just create a piece of text for a title, Bodacious Bunnies, for our website. And now we're looking at the align panel here, where with align to stage checked, we can click around and align things in all kinds of different ways around here. I'm going to align mine to the center and then to the top, and then use the arrow keys. Individually using the arrow keys just moves 1 pixel at a time, so you can really nudge things. I often hold shift when I use an arrow key, which will nudge things 10 pixels at a time. So I think about that works. I nudged it down about 30 pixels from where it went to the top. So now I have a background and a title. So just take a moment, use, see how the align panel works, come up with some text, throw it on there. So we've made a gradient, we've made some text, and neither one of those things are in the library because we haven't made symbols out of them, but we won't need to make symbols out of anything that we don't need to animate or make a button or group in some other way, which we'll learn about here in the next couple of classes. So a lot of times, in fact, most of the time when I'm done with a layer and I'm done working on it, I will always lock the layer just so I don't accidentally select the wrong thing or grab the wrong thing, especially when we're starting out. So make sure that you've got your background all set and your background layer is locked, and then you've got your title all set and your title layer is locked. All right. And then next, after we've got our text title up there, now we're actually going to want to use these images to create some buttons. So let's make a new layer that goes above title and name that buttons. Now, in the same way that we did our move, shrink, and flip buttons, where we just set one of them up and then copied them, we're going to do the same thing with these bunnies because we're going to do a bunch of setup to get the button just the way we want it. And then instead of having to redo all of that, do it all 4 times, we can very quickly kind of duplicate that symbol and just change out the image. So we're going to start with Bunny 1. Let's just take Bunny 1 from the library and drag it onto this buttons layer. All right. Should be about this size because we made them all the same, 400 by 400. Now this is a huge button right now. We're going to want 4 of these to fit on the screen. So I actually want to scale this down. However, I want to scale it to a specific point. Rather than just using the free transform tool and just scaling this willy-nilly to whatever I think looks right, I want to scale it exactly 50%. So let me show you how that works. Select your object and then your image, and then there's another tool over here, the transform tool. It's got like a box with a bunch of little handles around it and a center point. You can select that transform tool, and just like in the properties panel, if I close the transform tool, where you can manually enter in the values for the width and height and the X and Y, the transform tool lets you manually type in values for the scale and for the rotation, and then even for the skew. This 3D rotation, that is outdated because it doesn't really work with HTML. But what you can do is I want to scale both of these. Now I'm going to lock them together using this little icon right here. If you don't, you just have to set them both. But I want to scale this down to 50% exactly. So just go to 50 and poof. Hit enter and it makes it the right size. All right, so I have scaled that down to 50%, so it's going to fit a little bit better. And it doesn't really matter where it is yet, because once we create all 4 of them, we're going to use the align panel to kind of move them around. So what we want to do is with this image, we want to create a button symbol out of this image. So select the image, and you can use the convert to symbol icon, or you can go modify, convert to symbol, or you can be fast about it and use F8, which is what I do. Just tap F8 and convert to symbol. Now, we want to make sure it's a button. Mine's already set there, but make sure you're not on graphic or movie clip. Make sure you're on button. And we're going to leave the registration point in the middle. If it's sitting at the upper left or something, make sure it's set in the middle. And then we're going to name it. Like I talked about earlier, I found in time that it is beneficial to name things as much as you can generically, so they could be reused outside of the type of content. So again, instead of naming this like bunny button 1, or instead of naming these layers like bunny title or bunny background, just leaving it generic that isn't specific to the content can help you reuse things later on. And that can go for anything you're working on, really, when it comes to electronic stuff. So let's just keep it the same way we did with our example, and let's just name this button 1. Okay, you can name buttons whatever you want, but I like to do things that seem to make sense and follow a specific path, so it's easy to remember kind of what you're doing. So we named it button 1. Now, if you recall, when we coded our last buttons, what I called out as the most forgotten, missed part about buttons is you must always give your button an instance name. So even though our button now exists in the library, we've got our bunnies PSD asset folder, we've got our button 1, but even though it's a symbol in the library, I could technically have 4 copies of the exact same library button on the stage. And then when I'm trying to talk to these in code, they wouldn't know which one I'm talking to. And because of that, because you can have multiple instances of the same symbol, you need to give them an instance name or a stage name. All right, so all we have to do is just select. Be sure you don't double click and go inside of your button. It's easy to accidentally double click and go inside of it. We'll do that in a moment. But stay up on the main level on scene 1, select your bunny, and in the instance name, let's name it button 1. Again, all lowercase, no spaces. Let's keep it nice and simple so when we write code to tell the button what to do, it'll be nice and easy. All right, so now that we have our button and we have our instance name, that's just something that every single time, whoops, something scrolled away. Every single time I create a button instance, I name its instance name right away. And that's just so I don't forget later on. Because nothing will work. Your button will not do jack if you forget that. So now let's go inside of the button. Double click the button and come inside of it. And we're going to start by just giving ourselves some frames to work with. So right now we can only get to the up state. We want to be able to get to the over, the down, and the hit. Again, I think it's weird this program makes you add these frames, but go ahead and go over to the hit state and do add frames, not keyframes, but frames. Using the hotkeys, I'm going to use F5, which adds frames, or you could use this little thing and just add in a frame right here if you want. You can also right-click, choose add frames, or yeah, insert frame that way. But F5 and Shift F5, very, very conducive. You can get used to using those. All right, so we've got our frames here. And now we're going to have a couple different layers. Let's rename this layer image. Again, keeping it generic instead of saying like bunny1, even though that's the name of the image. We're just going to call this image. And then let's have, let's make a fill and a stroke image, or stroke layer name. So we've got an image layer, a fill layer, and a stroke layer. All right, now ultimately what I'm going to want to do here is I'm going to want to create these different button states where, yeah, that'll work. I'm going to want to make an outline around this that's going to show up, and the outline will change color when we roll over, and then we're going to make the whole inside change a color when we press down. So I'm going to set up these different button states. The first thing is on the stroke layer. Go ahead and select the up state on the stroke layer and select the rectangle tool. And we're going to draw, I basically just want to draw an outline exactly around this image. Now it should kind of snap to it, so we shouldn't have to manually go in and say, be exactly 400 by 400. But the first step is with this rectangle tool, I'm going to make it so there's no fill color and just a stroke color. All right, and my stroke color, it doesn't really matter what color it is. I'm actually going to be a little crazy about it and go pick one of the exact colors. I'm going to pick the exact blue that I used in my gradient. You don't have to go this far, but I'm going to go ahead and do that real quickly by going back up to scene 1, unlocking my background, using the selection tool, selecting the gradient, opening the gradient color window, selecting my first little gradient swatch, and then copying the hex value. So I just went to my gradient and ganked the exact color so I can match it up and it looks nice. And now that I've copied the hex color from my gradient, I'm going to lock my gradient background again and close my color panel and double click to go back into my button. And now that I'm finally back here and I have my color, I'm going to make sure that I have the stroke layer. I don't want to draw this on a different layer. I want to have my stroke layer selected, my up frame selected, and then now that I grab the rectangle tool, now I can set my stroke color and paste in that hex value that I grabbed from the gradient. Okay. And now I want to make sure I can see my stroke is big enough, so I'm going to make it 10 pixels before I draw it instead of 1 pixel. I'm going to make it 10 pixels in size. And now I'm going to just draw it around the image, but if I get anywhere near the corner of the image, it should actually snap to it. You see, yeah, it does. So I drew it in the corner, and now it's kind of snapping to the edge when I get to the edge of the image. And now I've got this. Go back up to the main. I can see, yeah, that looks great. Woohoo. All right. So I have a stroke around it. Now I want to change that stroke color when we roll over it. All right, so I'm actually going to now grab the other color for my gradient. You guys don't have to grab the gradient colors if you don't want, but it's a nice touch to make things match. So I'm going to unlock my background, select it, open the color panel. And this time I'm going to grab this greenish color that I have by selecting the little swatch arrow, copying the hex, and then lock my background layer again. I'm going to go inside of my button again, and now I want to make the rollover different, but the image is going to stay the same the whole time. The overstate, I want a keyframe here, so I'm going to use F6, or you can just set a keyframe using the insert keyframe button here. Again, this is a fly out to choose the type of thing you want to get. But I highly recommend, not only because it's faster, but it's also faster to take them away. If you undo a keyframe or undo frames, Shift F5 and Shift F6, much, much faster than finding it through the menus. But ultimately, I just want to change the color. So I leave up as my blue color, and now I'm going to select my outline here after I've keyframed the stroke layer on the over keyframe. And now I'm pasting that color in, and now I can see as I switch back and forth between my overstate and my upstate. All right, so we've gone far enough. I'm going to hit save. Still going to go a little further. But next up, we want to do the downstate. All right, now what I want for the downstate is, so this is my regular button. When I roll over it, it's going to look like this. Now I'm going to want to put a half transparent box over the image so that when I actually press down on it, I get some visual feedback because again, the overstate doesn't exist on a touch screen, and probably half the people are surfing the internet now on touch screens. So the downstate is the one that's most important. I usually do both, but the downstate is the must because you must give the user some visual feedback that they're actually touching the button. So I want the fill to just not be there for the up and over. I want to look exactly like this so we see our image come through. But then let's keyframe on the actual down state. F6, or set keyframe on the down state of, or the down frame, however you want to think of it, of the fill layer. And that initially just puts an empty keyframe, which is just has a little empty circle in it. But now that'll leave the up and over states empty once we put something in the down. All right, so now I want to use this same color, this greenish color that I still have the hex copied. Again, the colors don't really matter. I'm just trying to make mine pretty for my bodacious bunnies. And now I want to fill this in. So I could go back to the rectangle tool and choose to not have a stroke and have only a fill and set it the color, and I could draw it in, and that would work. But what also work, or what should work, is if I actually select the paint bucket tool and set the fill color for that, I should be able to just click in here and have it fill up. Yep, filled it up. Now, I don't want it to completely disappear. I want it to be 50% transparent. So I could have set it before I actually did it. But I can select that fill, and you can see next under color and style, next to the actual fill color, I can set this to 50% transparency, and that will give me this nice little transparent block there. Whoops, I put it on the wrong layer. Looks like when I filled it, it automatically went up to the stroke layer. Therefore, it's there on the overstate as well. No big deal. We can simply cut and paste it between layers. So I'm going to select that middle fill box that when I use the fill tool, it automatically put it on that stroke layer, which I guess makes sense. And I'm going to cut it. You can right click and choose cut, but I'm just going to use Command X. And then I'm going to select my fill layer with my downstate keyframe, and then I'm going to paste it. Command V. Now notice I pasted and it just slapped it in the middle of the screen. It'll do the same thing if you just right click and choose paste. It looks like it's making you paste in center. Anyway, if you use Command C and Command V, you have to hold Shift when you paste for it to go back where you took it from. Otherwise, you can just reposition it. Or if you use the right click menu to cut and paste, that's fine because it'll just say paste in center. Doesn't really matter. Wherever it pastes, just drag it back into position. But the key is to make sure that it goes onto that keyframe we set on the fill layer. So that now all four, really, even including the hit of our button states are taken care of. So our up state just has our original border color with our image, and then our over state changes our border color, but still has the original image. And then our down state leaves the border color because that keyframe is persisting along for the stroke, but gives us this 50% transparent fill when we're actually touching down on the button. Now the hit state, we don't have to do anything because it is just going to use the shape, the size of this as our button, and that's all we need. This is large enough that we don't need to make like a bigger hit state or anything for fingers to be able to touch it. So we have the button all set up, all these different states, and I'm going to go back up now. I'm actually going to lock, well, yeah, I'll lock them all. That's what I usually do when I'm working. When I'm done working with a layer, I usually lock it. And for the extra time I spend locking and unlocking things, I feel like it saves me a lot of time for not making as many mistakes as I would if I was accidentally grabbing the wrong layers and whatnot. So now that I have these set up, I want to test it. So I'm going to go back up to scene 1, and I'm going to save my file. I'm going to file save or Command S, Control S. And now I'm going to test it in the browser. Command return or Control Enter, Mac or PC. Open it up in the browser. I see my bodacious bunnies up in the upper left corner, and I can roll over my button and click my button. I can see my button states. Okay, so let's go ahead and make our other buttons. What I want to do is I want to just copy this, and you can do it in a couple of different ways. You can just copy and paste to make a couple different copies. I'm actually going to grab it from the library. So I'm going to go back over to the library here. And I'm going to drag 3 more copies of this. Okay, it doesn't matter where they are because we're going to use the align panel in a moment to take care of it. All right, so drag 3 other copies. And now open up the align panel. And I'm going to do a couple different things with the align panel here. All right, the first thing I want to do is select, make sure you have all 4 of your buttons selected. Make sure that they're all on the buttons layer, everything. All right, I'm using Shift to select. You can also marquee select around them all. We've got all 4 of my buttons selected. And with the align panel open, make sure align to stage is checked at first. Okay, we're going to do this a couple different ways to get the effect that we want. So with align to stage check, the first thing I want to do is I just want to center these vertically on the screen. So you can click this little align vertical center one, which snaps them up into the middle. If you accidentally hit the other one and they all go on top of each other, that's fine. Just make sure that you have it centered. And then I want to space them evenly. All right, so let's use this space evenly horizontally button, and you can see them automatically space evenly across the stage. All right, now that's nice and quick, but this kind of breaks one of the graphic design 101 rules, which is to never have anything stuck all the way up against an edge. You always want some padding of some kind for your eye to be able to kind of flow around objects. So we want to manually nudge these a little bit, and then we're going to use the align panel again. I'm going to show you what I mean. So go ahead and watch my screen for a moment here. And I'm going to leave the align panel alone for now. And the first thing I'm going to do is, I don't want these totally centered because we also have a title, and I kind of more want it centered here. So I'm just going to eye it. I'm going to use shift and the arrow key to nudge all 4 of them down a little bit. All right, so I just nudged them a couple times so it looks a little more centered between the bottom of this and this. But the real key here is I don't want these nudged all the way up against the edges. But I do want them to stay you know, spaced evenly. So I'm going to use shift and the arrow key to just nudge this in on either side a little bit. I'm just doing it 30 pixels like that. And now that these are nudged in, now I'm going to use the align panel again to align to space them evenly, but I have to uncheck align to stage. If I don't uncheck align to stage first, then they're going to snap right back to the edges of the stage. But if I uncheck align to stage, and this is very common to use the align panel just within objects, you know, within themselves, aligning them to each other, distributing them from each other, matching their size. But in this case, I'm going to select all 4 of them again, now that I've nudged these things in from the edges. And I'm going to make sure align to stage is unchecked. I'm going to click on this space evenly horizontally again, and this time it's going to keep the edges where they are and just space them out as they are. So as you can see now, it may not be exact, it might be exact, close. We have some nice spacing between all of our buttons, edged from the inside or from the edges of the screen, padded a little bit like that. And they're all nice and centered and everything's laid out nicely without us having to kind of manually do that. It's kind of a combo between manually nudging things around and using this align panel. I do that a lot when I'm laying things around on the screen. Okay, so now we want to finish up today by making these 4 separate buttons, all right? Now, if you recall from the last time, well, maybe you don't, but I'm gonna repeat it because it's really, really important. Right now, these are all copies of the same symbol, all right? These are all copies of button 1. So I could go inside of any of these. Now you can go inside of a symbol just through the library, but again, then you'll lose your context. So like I could double click on this and now I'm in here and could edit my button, but I don't see it, it's isolated. Sometimes you want that, but most of the time you don't. So I'm going to go back up. It shows me I'm inside of button 1. I'm going to use the arrow to go back to my scene. It's better to double click and go in because then you see your symbol, but you see it in context with everything else. Now right now, because these are all copies of the same button, if I were to change anything, including the image, we're going to end up changing, it's going to change it on all of them. And that's not what we want at all, right? What we want instead is back up on the main scene 1 level, and it's a command called duplicate symbol, all right? Technically, an instance is a copy of the same symbol. So right now, these are all 4 instances of the button symbol in the library. That's kind of the way to think of instances, and that's why they have instance names here with our buttons, which I lost my instance name. There's my original button 1 instance name. We'll come back to that though. But what we want is to create completely separate symbols. Now you can do it from the library itself. You can right click and you can duplicate, but it's better to do it on stage where you can lay things out and then make duplicates of them. So I'm going to leave this one over on the left as button 1, and then my next one over here to the right, I'm going to right click and choose duplicate symbol. And then I can change it. It automatically tries to name it button 1 copy. I'm going to name it button 2. And I can see in my library that it is a different button. To make it easier to not forget this step, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the other two right now as well. So I'm going to right click the third one, duplicate symbol, make this one button 3. And I'm going to right click, duplicate the symbol, make this one button 4. Okay, so now that I have 4 separate symbols in the library, they all start off the same, but now I should be able to go inside of any of them, make changes, and it should only affect that one. That's really important to understand that difference between having copies, instances of the same symbol from the library versus using a symbol to kind of create other symbols out of as a template. It's very, very powerful and important to remember when you're creating a menu or anything like that. You go back to make changes and make sure you're not making changes to more than one symbol at once. So now that these are separated like this, let's double click and go inside of this second one from the left. And I'm going to unlock my image layer, select my image, and instead of having to delete and then pull in my next image and then size it down to 50% and line it up and match it up, we could do it that way, but that would be the manual way. There is a better way. Inside of the properties panel, if I have my image selected, up here there's this little icon with an arrow pointing in either direction, and that's the swap icon. All right, so I can click swap, and it'll open up all of the images in my library and let me just switch to a different image and keep all of the image properties as far as its position and its scale and all of that stuff. So I'm just going to swap this to Bunny 2 and then relock the layer and go back up a level so I can keep going into the other buttons and do the same thing. Go into the third one, unlock, select the image, swap to Bunny 3, lock my layer, whoops, go back up. So again, going in and out of symbols like this, double clicking to go in, making edits, using the breadcrumb trail up top to move back out. That is going to be more and more prevalent as we move forward. Just wrapping your mind around going in and out of these different symbols is kind of timelines. So here, unlock my image layer, select my image, swap to Bunny 4, lock it, go back up to scene 1. And finally, when you're all done, I'm going to lock my buttons layer. I'm going to save my file. I'm going to run it in the browser. I'm going to check out all of my bunnies and all of my buttons. So imagine how much faster doing it that way would be than having to do all of those steps over again 3 more times that we did for this first one. So just setting up kind of the style for one, and you can do this with buttons, you can do this with pages like headers and footers. It's really, really powerful to kind of reuse objects, but you should now be able to roll over and click and see your buttons just kind of have that interactivity to them, that feedback that they are buttons, and you can click them without even having to write any code yet. But today, just some review, we learned how to import images, either individually or through a Photoshop file. Remembering it's very important to size down your image and make sure it's the appropriate pixel size before you pull it into Animate. Tell you how to use gradients with the color panel. We use the properties panel to set specific sizing and positioning. We use the transform panel to set specific scaling. We use the align panel, which was new, to kind of move things around on the screen. That's very, very helpful for laying things out. And then we did some stuff that's been the same, kind of repeating how setting up a button, getting all that set up. Actually, one more step. I want to set my instance names. Now, a lot of times you might not need to do this. I need to unlock my button layer, but it's just better, especially because I set one of them. I want to set the rest of them. So I'm going to keep it in line with what our images were like this. So this furthest one to the left on the rocks, you can see it says instance of button 1. We want to give it an instance name. And again, even though there's only one version of each of these symbols from the library, the code is still going to need this instance name to be able to talk to it. So I'm going to name this one button 2. Name this one button 3. I'm being careful not to click inside of it. I'm just selecting it without double clicking. And then change this one from button 1 to button 4. So just double checking and making absolute sure that knowing that part of the button setup process is to make sure and give it these instance names. We're going to check it when we create the button, and then we'll check it again when we create the code for the button to make sure, because that's the easiest thing to miss and not really understand why your button's not working. Button 2, button 3, button 4. Okay, so I've got the instance name matching the button name in each of these.